Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material and distill the most fascinating insights, giving you, well, a shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, you've challenged us with a chronology of the Crusades, which is a massive reference. I mean, it spans from 1095 all the way to 1456.
Yeah, it's incredibly comprehensive. Our mission today is really to navigate this guide, pulling out the crucial developments, of the whole crusading movement. We're not just talking about the Near East, important as that is. We'll also explore these papally-sanctioned Christian expeditions across Anatolia, the Balkans, Iberia, even the Albigensian Crusade in France. This deep dive, it really shows how these events shaped the medieval world, often in, well, surprising and counterintuitive ways.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because I think many of us, maybe you listening to, think of the Crusades as, one single thing, a unified event. But these sources, they show it was sprawling, dynamic, often contradictory. So maybe before the famous calls to arms, what was the intricate political and religious landscape like? Late 11th century, what set the stage?
Well, what's really striking in the sources is that there wasn't a single trigger. It was more a complex convergence of factors. Across both Western Europe and the Near East, you see several crucial threads kind of weaving together. On one hand, you've got the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, based in Constantinople, hugely powerful, but facing immense pressure around this time. Emperor Romanus IV, he was trying desperately to sort of reassert control, secure his eastern borders, but constantly battling internal dissent, rebellions from ambitious generals. So Byzantium was vulnerable, distracted.
Right. So a major Eastern power is struggling. What's happening in the West then?
At the same time, you've got this new military power consolidating in Western Europe, the Normans. Figures like Robert Guiscard, the Duke of Apulia, they established a formidable presence in southern Italy, Sicily, the sources point out. By 1071, barring the last Byzantine holdout in Italy, it surrenders to Guiscard.
Wow.
And that marks the end of Byzantine rule in Italy after over 530 years. So this rising Western military force, well, it's looking for new horizons.
And these rising military powers, they were operating in an era that was also being shaped by increasing papal authority, weren't they?
Absolutely. That's crucial. The election of Cardinal Hildebrand as Pope Gregory VII in 1073. Right. He was a truly aggressive promoter of the rights of the Holy See over secular rulers. This wasn't just, a new pope. It signaled a whole new era of papal assertiveness. The pope wanted significant influence, not just spiritual, but political, military, across Europe.
Okay.
That ambition becomes a key ingredient.
So struggling Byzantium, powerful new Western forces, an assertive papacy, but crucially, all these things kind of converge on a flashpoint in Palestine, right? The control over Jerusalem itself.
Well, precisely. That's the spark in many ways.
Yeah.
In 1071, the Seljuk general Atsiz conquers Jerusalem for the Fatimid Caliphate of Egypt. Now, just for context, the Fatimids were Shia Muslims. They were seen as heretic by the conquered Sunni Seljuks.
Right.
And this religious difference, the sources point out, it often led to more harassment of Christian pilgrims by zealous Turks in Jerusalem than was the norm under the tolerant Fatimids, and growing Western resentment. So pilgrimage becomes harder, more dangerous.
Yeah.
And that fuels calls for intervention back west.
And we can't forget what was happening even closer to home for Western Europe, the early stages of the Reconquista in Spain.
Yes, absolutely. Even then, Iberia was a battleground. Christian kingdoms like Castile were actively pushing south, taking areas like Galicia. By 1086, local Muslim emirs, feeling the pressure, were calling in help from North Africa, the aggressive, puritanical Muslim warriors of the Moroccan Almoravid state. So what you see here, it's not one isolated event. It's really a perfect storm. Byzantine weakness, rising Norman and papal power, that change in Jerusalem affecting pilgrims, plus ongoing conflict in Spain. It really set the stage for what your sources powerfully call Europe's first experience of colonialism.
And that perfect storm, as you called it, it finally ignites. Pope Urban II, Clermont, 1095, sparking what the sources describe as Crusade fever. The First Crusade launches, incredible zeal. They conquer Jerusalem in 1099. But the sources quickly shift tone, don't they, to the stark reality. Holding on to it was incredibly hard.
That's the crucial turning point, isn't it? Yeah, the initial, excitement of the conquest of Jerusalem. But it quickly became clear that holding on to gains made by the golden generation of First Crusaders would be difficult. The sources nail it. Pandora's box had been opened. These new Christian states, like Antioch under Bohemond, They immediately faced really complex internal politics crusaders arguing amongst themselves, plus relentless external threats from Muslim powers wanting their territory back.
Right.
It was a constant struggle, just for survival, for legitimacy. It wasn't some triumphant final chapter.
And within this struggle, you see some really surprising, almost cynical political moves, like German Emperor Frederick II, 1229. He swept all before him and recovered Jerusalem. But here's the kicker. He did it after being excommunicated by the Pope, like he was trying to prove a point back home, maybe undermine the Pope. What does that tell us?
Well, it certainly underscores that motivations went way beyond just pure religious zeal, didn't they?
Yeah.
Political ambition, personal power struggles, sticking it to your rivals, that was always in the mix. Frederick's move is a prime example of these shifting alliances, these internal Christian conflicts that just complicate the whole picture.
Yeah.
But as impressive as recovering Jerusalem was, the sources are clear. His hold, like so many Crusader gains, was precarious. One by one, towns and mighty castles were again picked off by enemy forces, systematically pushing the Crusaders back, until they only held Acre.
Just Acre.
And its fall in 1291, well, that brought nearly 2 centuries of Western occupation to an end. It truly felt like the end of an era for the Latin East.
This deep dive really hammers home that the crusading movement wasn't just about the Near East. The papacy used this powerful idea, sanctioned crusades elsewhere too, like the really chilling Albigensian Crusade in southern France.
Yeah, what's fascinating there is how the whole crusading idea got repurposed. Starting around 1209, Pope Innocent III decides to eradicate the stubborn heretics, the Cathars, this dualist Christian group, and their lordly protectors. You even see powerful nobles like Count Raymond VI of Toulouse subjected to public scourging to show repentance.
Wow.
It was a brutal campaign led by figures like Simon of Montfort, and it really shows how the papacy could use the crusade banner to crush internal Christian dissent, consolidate power, not just fight external enemies.
And then you've got the Reconquista in Iberia running alongside all this.
Exactly. The Reconquista, the Reconquest, centuries-long campaigns by Christian kingdoms pushing back Muslim rule in Spain and Portugal. Your sources highlight people like King Alfonso the Pace of Aragon, described as a militantly expansionist Catholic warrior king, the first major patron in the crusading ideal and military orders in the peninsula. He retook Saragossa in 1118. And later, King James of Aragon finishes the Aragonese Reconquista by taking Valencia in 1238. It shows how crusade wasn't just one expedition. It could be this deeply ingrained generational effort tied up with taking territory.
And further north again, the Baltic Crusades, they feel quite different.
They do, yeah. Different context. Here you have the Teutonic Knights, the Knights of the Sword, active up there. In 1230, the Teutonic Knights get their first foothold in Chelmno, or Culm, on the Polish-Prussian border. And they have papal approval to conquer Prussia from its pagan inhabitants, basically as a papal fief. But these were tough campaigns. The sources note a heavy defeat of the Knights of the Sword at Saul in 1236. They lost their master, loads of knights. It just underscores how adaptable this idea of a religiously sanctioned military campaign became. Applied to different political, territorial, religious goals all across medieval Europe, often merging with local ambitions for land and power,
Now, if there's one event in the Crusades that really catches people off guard, it's got to be the Fourth Crusade. It took this completely unforeseen turn in 1204, not just a diversion, it felt like a betrayal.
Oh, profoundly significant. This is where you see Christians attacking Christians on a massive scale. The Crusade, it was originally aimed for Egypt, right? But it gets diverted to Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire.
Christian Constantinople.
Exactly. And the sack of Constantinople in April 1204 was notorious. Usual atrocities, as your sources starkly put it. I mean, imagine the shock. These crusaders, supposedly on a holy mission, they don't just loot the city. They hold a mock service in Hagia Sophia and installed a prostitute on Patriarch's throne.
That detail is just jaw-dropping. A deliberate act of contempt, not just conquest.
It really is.
So what does this all mean long-term? The city's pillaged, burned, a Latin empire gets set up, fundamentally fracturing the Byzantine state, a Christian power that had stood for centuries.
You've hit the nail on the head there. This event, it increased anti-Byzantine feeling in Italy, sure, but more importantly, it just poisoned Byzantine-Frank relations for centuries.
Centuries?
Yeah, it's such a stark reminder that the Crusades were never this monolithic, unified thing. Internal divisions, shifting allegiances, pure greed. It could lead to devastating unintended consequences. And it fundamentally altered the region's history. Ironically, it really weakened Christian Europe against future threats from the East.
So as these Latin states in the Near East became more and more precarious, this new power arises in the Islamic world, the Mamluks. Particularly under Sultan Baybars, he seems to have just systematically chipped away at the remaining Christian strongholds.
That's a key observation. You can really trace it through a series of, well, almost relentless campaigns. Annual invasions, sieges. Baybars invades Palestine in 1265, methodically taking places like Caesarea, Safed, often held by the military orders. He even captures the Crac des Chevaliers in 1271, this massive hospital or fortress considered almost impregnable.
Right.
These weren't random raids. It was a sustained, systematic effort to dismantle the Crusader presence entirely.
And even huge efforts from Europe were failing dramatically by this point. Louis IX of France, Saint-Louis, he leads the Seventh Crusade to Egypt in 1250. Total disaster. His forces get crushed at Mansoura. His own brother, Robert of Artois, killed. Loads of Templars, too. And Louis himself is captured. Imagine the blow to morale back in Europe.
Oh, absolutely. A huge blow. It profoundly weakened the Crusader position in the Levant. There wasn't the manpower or the will, really, to recover significantly after that. And the ultimate sort of bitter end for Western occupation comes with the fall of Acre in 1291, the last major city they held.
The very last one.
Yeah. The sources describe it vividly, people trying to escape by sea if they could, but many others indiscriminately killed or enslaved, just brutal. And the very, very last Christian military presence in the Levant, that whole region, modern Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, it ends in 1302. The blockade of Ruad Island, its Templar garrison was promised safe passage, and then enslaved or executed. A complete and tragic end to nearly 2 centuries of that Crusader presence.
But even after the fall of Outremer, this collective name for the Crusader states the actual crusading spirit, or maybe the idea of it. It didn't just vanish, did it? It continued in Europe, but directed against new threats.
Exactly. It adapted again. You see these later crusades, like the catastrophic defeat at Nicopolis in 1396 against Bajazid's Ottoman forces. Huge pan-European army crushed. Or Varna in 1444, where another Christian army, technically breaking the treaty, was routed again by the Ottomans.
So the momentum has shifted.
Completely. This relentless Ottoman pressure eventually leads to the fall of Constantinople itself in 1453. I mean, talk about a symbolic end to an era. And then the Turkish attack on Belgrade in 1456. It marks a really significant shift in European power dynamics. The threat is now much closer to home.
So if we try and connect this all to the bigger picture, the Crusades really were a period where, as the sources said, Pandora's box had been opened.
Absolutely. It unleashed centuries of conflict, profoundly reshaped politics, religion, society. Across multiple continents, you go from those initial fervent calls for pilgrimage, the zeal of the First Crusade, through shocking diversions like the sack of Constantinople, to the eventual systematic dismantling of the Christian strongholds. The story is just far more complex, far more nuanced than any simple narrative allows.
Yeah, the fascinating nuggets of knowledge we've pulled out today, they show this mosaic of motivations, don't they? Religious zeal, sure, but also political ambition, economic gain, constantly shifting alliances, both within Christian factions and between Christians and Muslims. It's a really powerful testament, I think, to how grand ideals can be twisted, expanded, and sometimes tragically turned against their own perceived interests.
Which really raises an important question maybe for you, our listener, to think about. Given the long-term, often unintended, and frequently devastating consequences of these medieval movements, what lessons might we draw about the complexities of, say, international intervention or the power of religious and political narratives in shaping history even today?